The sun rose lazily over the hills surrounding Heartland Valley, a small town nestled between golden prairies and dense woods that held mysteries as ancient as the earth itself. Amber, a 15-year-old girl with almond-shaped eyes and hair, as black as night, awoke to the sound of birds that seemed more agitated than usual on that Saturday morning. "Amber, breakfast is on the table," the sweet voice of Grandma Martha echoed through the simple whitewashed house. Amber stretched lazily. She felt something different in the air, as if the atmosphere itself was charged with expectation. She got up, looked out the window and saw the backyard illuminated by the first rays of sunlight. Something gleamed between the roots of the old mango tree that her grandmother claimed was older than the town itself. "Coming, Grandma," she answered, but her eyes remained fixed on that mysterious gleam. After breakfast, while Grandma Martha arranged the small medicinal herb stand she maintained on the house's porch, Amber headed to the backyard. Kneeling, she began to dig where she had seen the gleam. The soil yielded easily under her eager fingers until she found it, a silver medallion ornamented with symbols that seemed to dance under the sunlight. "What is this?" she murmured to herself, cleaning off the dirt that covered it. The inscriptions were strange, resembling ancient Native American words. In the center was a drawing reminiscent of a buffalo, majestic and imposing. As soon as her fingers traced the outline of the animal, Amber felt a strange warmth course through her body, as if an electric current was flowing through her veins. Grandma Martha appeared in the backyard and froze when she saw what her granddaughter was holding. Her wrinkled face paled. "Where did you find that, child?" The old woman's voice trembled. "It was buried here, Grandma." "What is it?" "It looks so ancient." The grandmother approached slowly, her eyes fixed on the medallion as if she were facing a ghost. "Keep this, Amber. Keep it well hidden. Don't show it to anyone," she whispered, looking nervously around. "But why? What's wrong with it?" "Nothing's wrong, dear. It's important. Too important. This medallion has belonged to our family for generations. We thought it had been lost when—" Grandma Martha stopped, as if she had said too much. "When what, Grandma? What aren't you telling me?" The serene countenance that Amber knew gave way to a grave expression she had never seen on her grandmother's face. "There are things about our family that you don't know yet, Amber, things I hoped I would never need to tell you. But now—" Grandma Martha sighed deeply. "Now it seems the time is coming. The medallion has found you." That night, Amber couldn't sleep. She had kept the medallion in a small wooden box under her bed, but she felt as if the object was calling to her. Her eyelids were heavy, but her mind was buzzing with unanswered questions. What was her grandmother hiding? Why had that simple object frightened her so much? Outside, the wind blew harder, making the tree leaves dance to an ancestral melody. And in the darkness of the forest that surrounded Heartland Valley, attentive eyes watched the house. They weren't human eyes, but they carried ancient wisdom and infinite patience. Thunder, the guardian buffalo, had sensed the awakening of the medallion and knew that the time for revelations was near. In the neighboring house, Joe, Grandma Martha's longtime friend, also remained awake, restless. He knew what the reappearance of the medallion meant. The ancient enemies would soon realize that the power they sought was accessible again, and Heartland Valley, which had lived in peace for so many years, would soon be at the center of an ancestral dispute. Amber's destiny was beginning to unfold, tied by invisible threads to a past she didn't know and an uncertain future. The days following the discovery of the medallion were marked by a strange normality for Amber. Grandma Martha avoided the subject, changing the conversation whenever her granddaughter tried to learn more about the mysterious object. But the young girl could feel that something had changed in the small town's atmosphere. People looked at her differently when she passed through the central square. Joe, the general store owner, whispered with Irene from the bakery as they watched her. Even at school, Miss Helena seemed more attentive to her movements, as if expecting Amber to do something extraordinary at any moment. "Grandma, why is everyone acting strange around me?" Amber asked during dinner, a week after finding the medallion. Grandma Martha sighed, setting her spoon beside her plate. "News travels fast in Heartland Valley, my dear. Some people know what it means when the medallion reappears. And what does it mean? It means you've been chosen, just like your mother was before you. Amber's heart raced. Her grandmother rarely mentioned her parents. All she knew was that they had passed away in a car accident when she was only 5 years old. Chosen for what? What does my mother have to do with this? Grandma Martha stood up, her eyes lost in distant memories. It's not time yet, Amber, but soon, very soon, you'll know everything. That night, as the full moon illuminated the prairie, Amber was awakened by a strange sound coming from the garden. She approached the window and saw her grandmother kneeling in the center of a stone circle she had never noticed before. Grandma Martha was chanting words in a language Amber didn't understand while swinging a small container from which fragrant smoke emerged. Intrigued, the young girl put on a robe and silently descended the stairs. Upon reaching the garden, she hid behind a tree to observe the ritual. That's when she noticed her grandmother wasn't alone. Joe and 3 other town elders formed a circle around her. All wore necklaces with symbols similar to those on the medallion. "The Council of Guardians is gathered under the full moonlight," declared Grandma Martha, with a voice that didn't seem like her own, deeper and filled with authority. "We feel the disturbance in the woods. He is returning." "It can't be, Martha," protested a woman whom Amber recognized as Irene, the town's midwife. "Charles was banished years ago." "The banishment didn't stop him from continuing to seek the treasure of Heartland Valley," replied Joe, his usually cheerful expression now grave. "My contacts in Springfield confirmed it. He's gathering men, people who don't care about sacred nature or balance, people who only see material value." A shiver ran down Amber's spine. Who was Charles? And what treasure were they talking about? "And now the medallion has resurfaced," continued Grandma Martha. "It's not a coincidence. The forest spirits are warning us. We need to prepare Amber." "She's too young," protested another voice that Amber couldn't identify, just like Alice was, "and we know what happened to her and Victor. My daughter and son-in-law gave their lives to protect the secret." Grandma Martha's voice faltered for a moment. "I won't allow their sacrifice to have been in vain. Amber has the blood of the Guardians. It's her right and her destiny." Twig broke under Amber's feet, betraying her presence. 5 pairs of eyes turned in her direction. "Amber!" exclaimed Grandma Martha, rising quickly. "What are you doing here, child?" "What's going on, Grandma?" The young girl emerged from her hiding place, her eyes brimming with tears. "You were talking about my parents. You said they died in an accident, but now you're talking about sacrifice? What secret is this? Who is Charles?" The council exchanged concerned looks. It was Joe who broke the silence. "She deserves to know, Martha. The medallion chose her." Grandma Martha suddenly looked older and more tired in the moonlight. "Come, my child, sit with us. Tonight you will learn the true story of our family and the reason why your parents left this world." With her heart racing, Amber approached the circle. As she sat among the elders, she felt a current of energy course through her body, as if the earth itself was pulsing beneath her feet. Far, far away, the sound of powerful hooves echoed in the night. Thunder, the guardian buffalo, was announcing his presence. "Your parents didn't die in an accident, as I've always told you," Grandma Martha began, her voice trembling with emotion. "They were guardians, like all of us here, descendants of a lineage that dates back to the original peoples of this land. Our mission is to protect the treasure of Heartland Valley." Amber listened attentively as the stars witnessed the revelation of secrets that had remained hidden for years. "What treasure is this, Grandma? Gold? Diamonds?" A melancholic smile appeared on Grandma Martha's lips. "No, my child. It's something much more valuable. It's the connection between worlds, the life force that unites human beings with nature, an energy so powerful that in the wrong hands it could cause irreparable imbalance." "Charles was one of us," interrupted Joe, his gaze lost in the shadows of the night. "One of the most promising guardians of his generation. He became your father's best friend. Together, they and your mother, Alice, formed the young core of the council." "But Charles always wanted more," continued Irene, the midwife. He thought, "We should use the power of the treasure for our own benefit, to control instead of protect." Grandma Martha's expression hardened. He betrayed our trust. He tried to access the treasure alone, breaking the balance. Your parents stopped him, and for that... A crash interrupted the narrative. Car headlights illuminated the entrance to the property, and the sound of tires skidding on the dirt road filled the night. Shouts and harsh orders echoed through the homestead. "They're here!" exclaimed Joe, rising abruptly. "Quick! We need to hide Amber!" Before they could react, 3 pickup trucks invaded the property, destroying the wooden fence and stopping just a few meters from the circle. Hooded men descended from the vehicles, wielding weapons. "Martha!" shouted one of them, staying in the shadows. "We know you have the medallion. Hand it over now and no one gets hurt." Amber felt her blood freeze in her veins. How did these men know about the medallion? Instinctively, she brought her hand to her chest, where the object rested under her nightgown, hanging from the cord that Grandma Martha had given her to keep it safe. "Get off my property!" Grandma Martha stood up, surprisingly dignified for her fragile age. "You are not welcome here." The man laughed, a cold sound without joy. "Unfortunately, we're not asking for permission." With a signal, the invaders advanced. Joe and the other elders tried to protect Grandma Martha and Amber, but they were quickly overpowered. One of the men grabbed Grandma Martha by the arm. "Last chance, old woman. Where is the medallion?" "We'll never tell," Grandma Martha spat, the words with contempt. The aggressor raised his hand, ready to strike her. "No!" shouted Amber, rushing forward. "Leave my grandmother alone!" 2 men grabbed her, immobilizing her. "Well, look what we have here." The Guardian's granddaughter, the leader approached, observing Amber with a cruel smile. "So similar to your mother." "You knew my mother?" The man removed his hood, revealing a face marked by scars and eyes as cold as ice. "Charles," murmured. Grandma Martha, horrified. Amber stared at the man, feeling a mixture of fear and hatred. So this was the traitor, the man who had caused her parents' departure. "Hello, Martha. It's been a long time." Charles smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. "And you must be Amber. The last time I saw you, you were just a child." "What? A shame our reunion has to be like this." "What do you want?" asked Amber, struggling against the grip of the henchman. "I want what's rightfully mine," replied Charles, coming closer. "The medallion, the key to the treasure. And I know you found it." Grandma Martha took advantage of the distraction and with surprising strength freed herself from the man who was holding her, launching herself at Charles. "You won't touch her!" The impact made Charles stagger, but he quickly regained his balance. With a quick movement, he pushed Grandma Martha violently. The old woman fell heavily to the ground. "Grandma!" cried Amber, desperate. Charles approached Grandma Martha, who was moaning in pain, and placed his foot on her chest, pressing lightly. "I'm losing my patience, Martha. The medallion. Now." Tears were streaming down Amber's face as she watched the scene helplessly. Suddenly, a deep guttural roar cut through the night, so powerful that it seemed to make the air itself vibrate. The invaders looked around, frightened. "What was that?" asked one of them. Charles paled, his gaze directed towards the edge of the forest. "It can't be." From among the trees, something huge and dark advanced. The earth trembled under the weight of powerful hooves. 2 eyes bright as burning embers fixed on the group. "Thunder," whispered Grandma Martha, a weak smile appearing on her lips. The imposing figure of Thunder emerged completely from the forest, revealing itself under the moonlight. It wasn't an ordinary buffalo. Its size surpassed any animal Amber had ever seen, with black fur that seemed to absorb light itself. Its horns, long and imposing, gleamed as if made of living silver. But the most impressive were its eyes, deep and ancient, that seemed to contain the wisdom of centuries. It's real," stammered Amber, feeling the medallion on her chest, warming to the point of almost burning her skin. Charles took a step back, his face a mask of shock and fear. "Impossible! Thunder hasn't manifested in decades." The creature advanced with heavy steps, that made the earth tremble. The men holding Amber released her, backing away in panic. One of them pointed a gun at the buffalo, but Charles stopped him. "No! Weapons don't work against him. Retreat! Retreat now!" The buffalo let out another deafening roar, and panic took hold of the invaders. In a matter of seconds, they abandoned the site, stumbling over each other in their haste to escape. Only Charles remained, his gaze alternating between the medallion on Amber's neck and the Guardian. "This isn't over, Martha. The medallion chose the girl, but she knows nothing, has no power. I'll return when she's ready for what really matters." With these words, he too disappeared into the darkness. Amber ran to Grandma Martha, who was slowly rising with Joe's help. "Grandma, are you okay?" she asked, hugging the old woman carefully. "I'm fine, my child," replied Grandma Martha, her gaze fixed on the buffalo that now observed the scene a few meters away. "Thunder protected us, as he has done for so many generations of our family." Amber turned to contemplate the Guardian. She felt strangely connected to that magnificent creature, as if she had known it for a long time. Hesitantly, she took a step in its direction. "Amber, be careful," warned Joe, but Grandma Martha silenced him with a gesture. "Let her, Joe. This is how it should be." Amber continued advancing slowly until she was just 2 steps away from the enormous buffalo. Thunder lowered his majestic head, his eyes fixed on hers. Without knowing exactly why, the young girl extended her hand and touched the animal's forehead. A current of sensations and images invaded her mind. The forest seen from impossible heights, the wind cutting through the prairie, the flow of vital energy that permeated all of nature. She also saw fragments of the past, her parents young and smiling alongside a Charles, very different from the bitter man she had just met. The three were united, protectors, guardians. When the connection broke, Amber took a step back, dazed by the intensity of the experience. "What was that?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Thunder showed you what you need to know," replied Grandma Martha, approaching with difficulty, supported by Joe. "He's more than an animal, Amber. He's the manifestation of the spirits of nature, a guardian as ancient as these lands." Thunder snorted softly as if in agreement, and then, with the same majesty with which he had appeared, turned and walked back to the forest, disappearing among the trees. Later, in the safety of the house, with the doors locked and Joe standing guard, Grandma Martha applied an herbal balm to her own bruises while finishing the story that had been interrupted. "Your parents and Charles formed the most promising trio of guardians of their generation. They grew up together, trained together, swore to protect the treasure together," she explained, wincing slightly as she touched a bruise on her arm. "But Charles began to change. He thought we were wasting the power of the treasure by keeping it hidden. He wanted to use the energy, for his own benefit, to gain wealth and influence." "And what exactly is this treasure?" asked Amber, trying to assimilate everything that had happened. Grandma Martha smiled enigmatically. "It's not a physical object like gold or jewels. It's a wellspring of vital energy, a source of power that connects all living beings. Some call it magic, others a miracle. Our Native American ancestors simply called it the breath of the forest. It's hidden in a place that can only be accessed with the medallion you found, and only by someone of pure guardian blood." "Like me," murmured Amber, touching the medallion that still hung around her neck. "Yes, like you, my child." Grandma Martha took her granddaughter's hands in hers. "Your parents realized that Charles was planning to steal the medallion and force entry into the sacred place. They confronted him and there was a struggle. Charles seriously injured your father. Your mother, desperate, used the power of the medallion to banish Charles, sending him far away. But the effort was too much. She left this world along with your father, who was already very weak from the confrontation." Silent tears streamed down Amber's face. "So they didn't die in an accident?" "No, dear. They sacrificed themselves to protect the balance, to keep the treasure safe. And now, with Charles's return, I see that their sacrifice needs to be honored. You have been chosen, Amber. The medallion has resurfaced for you." Amber wiped away her tears, a new determination growing in her chest. "What do I need to do, Grandma?" "Grandma, Martha squeezed her granddaughter's hands affectionately. Learn, train, connect with ancestral knowledge, and above all, find Thunder again. He is the key to your training, to awakening the gifts that are already within you. And how do I do that? Tomorrow we'll begin your initiation. The full moon will still shine for 2 more nights. It's the perfect time for the first rituals. Grandma Martha looked out the window towards the forest that extended beyond the backyard. He'll come when you're ready. Guardians always find their way to Thunder, or he to them. Dawn found Amber already awake, sitting on the porch of the house, watching the first rays of sun filter through the leaves of the trees. She hadn't been able to sleep well, her mind filled with images of the attack, of Charles, of Thunder. The medallion, which she now never took off her neck, seemed to pulse lightly against her skin, as if it had a life of its own. Grandma Martha appeared at the door, carrying 2 cups of herbal tea. Despite the visible bruises on her arms and the slight limp, the old woman had an air of renewed strength. "Good morning, my child. I figured you'd be awake," she said, handing one of the cups to Amber. "This tea will help clear your thoughts. We have a lot of work ahead of us." Amber accepted the drink, inhaling the aroma that reminded her of wet earth and wildflowers. "How do we start, Grandma?" Grandma Martha sat next to her granddaughter, her eyes scanning the horizon as if looking for invisible signs. "First, we need to strengthen your connection with the medallion and with the earth. Then you'll learn the complete history of the Guardians, the rituals, the herbs, the enchantments." She paused, taking a sip of tea. "And if we're lucky, Thunder will come again to guide you." The day passed in a whirlwind of activities. Grandma Martha showed Amber a secret compartment under the living room floorboard where she kept an ancient grimoire bound in leather, with pages yellowed by time. "This book has been in our family for generations. It contains everything a guardian needs to know." Amber leafed through the volume with reverence, marveling at the detailed drawings of medicinal plants, constellations, and symbols that resembled those engraved on the medallion. Much of the text was written in an ancient Native American language, but some sections had been translated into English. For the rest of the day, Amber immersed herself in ancestral knowledge. Grandma Martha taught her to identify healing herbs in the garden, to prepare protection amulets with seeds and crystals, and to intone the first ceremonial chants that strengthened the connection with the spirits of nature. At nightfall, Joe returned accompanied by the other 3 elders of the council, Irene, Anthony, and Connie. All wore simple white clothes and brought bags with materials for the initiation ritual. "Charles left town, but his men are still around," Joe informed Grandma Martha in a low voice. "We're being watched." "That won't stop us," replied the old woman firmly. "The initiation needs to happen tonight with the full moon. Nature will protect us." When darkness completely took over the sky, dotted only by stars and the silver glow of the moon, the group headed to the stone circle in the garden. Amber, following her grandmother's instructions, wore a simple white dress and was barefoot, her feet touching the earth directly. The 5 elders positioned themselves around the circle, each holding a candle the color of the elements. White for air, red for fire, blue for water, green for earth, and purple for spirit. Grandma Martha led Amber to the center of the circle. "We are gathered under the light of the full moon to initiate Amber, daughter of Alice and Victor, into the sacred tradition of the forest guardians," declared Grandma Martha, her voice acquiring a resonance that seemed to echo beyond the small circle. One by one, the elders lit their candles, intoning blessings in the ancient language of the ancestors. The air around the circle seemed to vibrate with an invisible energy, and Amber felt a tingling sensation course through her entire body, concentrating at the point where the medallion touched her skin. "The path of the guardian is one of sacrifice and honor," continued Grandma Martha, drawing symbols in the air with a sprig of rue. "It is the journey of one who walks between 2 worlds, serving as a bridge between the visible and the invisible." Amber closed her eyes, feeling the energy growing around her. Her grandmother's voice seemed to come from very far away now. "For generations our family has protected the balance. Today you become part of that lineage, not only by blood, but by choice and commitment. Grandma Martha removed from a small leather pouch a vial containing a dark, thick liquid that glowed softly under the moonlight. "This is the elixir of the guardians, prepared with the sap of the sacred tree that grows in the heart of the forest," she explained, removing the cap. "By drinking it, you'll connect with all the guardians who came before you, and with the very essence of the earth." With trembling hands, Amber accepted the vial. The liquid had an intense aroma, reminiscent of wet earth after rain, wildflowers, and something deeper, primordial. She took a deep breath and drank the contents in one gulp. The effect was immediate. A wave of heat spread from her stomach to every extremity of her body. Her legs weakened, and she fell to her knees in the center of the circle. Images flooded her mind. Ancient forests, rituals under full moons of centuries past, faces of ancient guardians, her ancestors, and then, more vivid, the faces of her parents. "Mom, Dad," she murmured, tears streaming down her face. She saw Alice and Victor as she had never seen them in her childhood memories, strong, determined, powerful in their connection with nature. She saw fragments of their life together, of their love, of their commitment to protecting the treasure. And then she saw the final confrontation with Charles, the betrayal, the pain. A lament escaped her lips as the vision dissipated, leaving her back in the stone circle, breathless and trembling. "You saw them," said Grandma Martha, not as a question but a statement. "Yes," replied Amber, wiping away her tears. "They were so strong, so bright. The elixir allows new guardians to connect with those who came before. Your parents live through you now, Amber. Their strength is your strength." Suddenly, the medallion on her chest began to glow intensely, emitting a silvery light that illuminated the entire circle. The elders exclaimed in surprise and admiration. "The medallion has accepted her," declared Joe, his voice filled with emotion. "She is truly the chosen one." The weeks following the initiation were intense for Amber. Her body and mind underwent subtle but profound transformations. Her senses became sharper. She could hear the whisper of leaves at impressive distances, distinguish dozens of aromas. In the forest, feel the vital energy pulsing in each plant, in each animal. Every morning before sunrise, Grandma Martha took her to the heart of the prairie to train. She taught her to communicate with the spirits of nature, to identify the energy patterns of plants, to sense the presence of other living beings even without seeing them. "Connection is everything," Grandma Martha always repeated. "A guardian doesn't command nature, they are part of it. They are a channel for its power, not its master." On one of these mornings, while meditating under an ancient oak tree, Amber felt a familiar presence. Opening her eyes, she saw Thunder watching her, a few meters away. Without breaking eye contact, the young girl slowly stood up. "You came," she said quietly. The buffalo took a step forward, slightly inclining his majestic head. It was an invitation. Amber looked at her grandmother, who was observing the scene, with a mixture of pride and apprehension. "Go," Grandma Martha nodded. "He wants to show you something." Hesitantly, Amber approached the guardian. When she was just a step away, Thunder lowered himself in a clear invitation for her to mount. The young girl swallowed hard, gathering courage, and then climbed onto the buffalo's back. Immediately, a mental connection established itself between them. "Don't be afraid, young guardian." The voice, deep and ancestral, echoed directly in her mind. "There's something you need to see." Before she could respond, Thunder galloped across the prairie faster than any animal should be capable of. The world around became a blur of colors and shapes. Amber held onto the thick fur as the wind whipped her face. Finally, they arrived at a hidden clearing, surrounded by century-old trees whose branches intertwined, forming a kind of natural dome. In the center, a small lake of crystal-clear waters reflected the sky like a perfect mirror. "This is the mirror of time," explained Thunder as Amber dismounted. "One of the few places where the veil between worlds is thin enough to be crossed." The young girl approached the edge of the lake, fascinated by the perfection of its still surface. "What should I do?" "Look. See what needs to be seen." Amber. knelt at the edge of the lake and leaned over the waters. For a moment, she saw only her own reflection. Then the image rippled and transformed. She saw Charles, younger, alongside her parents, the three laughing together in front of Grandma Martha's house. She saw the moment when he began to change, his eyes acquiring a gleam of greed upon discovering the true nature of the treasure of Heartland Valley. She saw his secret attempts to access the power alone and how it gradually corrupted him. The scene changed to the final confrontation. Charles, consumed by ambition, attacking Victor when he tried to prevent him from reaching the sacred place. Alice, desperate, using the power of the medallion to push him away, to protect the secret. The immense effort required by the banishment. Ritual draining her life force and that of Victor, already seriously injured. Silent tears streamed down Amber's face as she witnessed the last moments of her parents, their farewell, the love in their eyes as they left this world embraced, having fulfilled their duty as guardians. The image rippled again, now showing the present. Charles in a luxurious mansion in Springfield, surrounded by maps and ancient books, obsessed with finding a new way to access the treasure. His eyes, once bright and kind in the old memories, now cold and calculating. "He's going to try again," murmured Amber, understanding the urgency of the situation. "Yes," confirmed Thunder, "and this time he has enough knowledge to cause irreparable damage to the balance. How do we stop him?" "It's not a matter of stopping, but of restoring. Charles is not the true enemy, but a victim of his own ambition. The treasure has corrupted his perception over the years, as it has done with those of weak heart for generations." Amber frowned, confused. "I don't understand. Isn't the treasure something good? Something we should protect? The treasure is pure power, neither good nor evil. It's like fire, it can warm or destroy. The Guardians don't exist just to protect it, but to ensure that its power remains in balance." The surface of the lake rippled one last time, revealing an image that made Amber's heart race. A hidden cave beneath a waterfall, a stone altar in the center, and on it a small sphere of pulsing light, so bright that it was almost impossible to look directly at it. This is the true treasure of Heartland Valley, the living essence of the forest, condensed in its purest form. The image disappeared, and Amber saw only her reflection in the calm waters again. "Why are you showing me this?" she asked, standing up and facing Thunder. "Because the time has come for you to complete the work your parents began. The balance is breaking, Charles's banishment is naturally weakening, and his connection with the treasure, although corrupted, is growing again. He will soon find a path to the sacred cave." "And what should I do?" "You must find the treasure first, and do what your parents couldn't. Restore the complete seal that protects its energy, a ritual that can only be performed during the spring equinox, which will occur in 3 days. The medallion on Amber's chest pulsed, as if responding to the gravity of the situation. "I'm not ready. I've barely begun my training." "No guardian ever felt completely ready," replied Thunder gently. "But the blood of your parents flows in your veins, and the medallion chose you. The forest trusts you, Amber. I trust you." Night was falling over Heartland Valley when Amber returned to her grandmother's house, riding on Thunder's back. Grandma Martha waited anxiously on the porch, her face marked with worry. "Thank heavens, you're back," exclaimed the old woman, hugging her granddaughter as soon as she dismounted. "What happened? Where were you?" "Thunder showed me the mirror of time," replied Amber, her voice carrying a new determination. "I saw everything, Grandma. I saw my parents, I saw Charles, I saw the treasure." Grandma Martha paled, leaning against the wall to keep from falling. "The mirror. It hasn't been revealed to a guardian for generations. This means that the balance is in greater danger than we imagined," completed Joe, who emerged from the house having heard the arrival. "The council is gathered, Martha. We received concerning news." Inside the house, Irene, Anthony, and Connie were seated around the kitchen table, their faces grave and tense. "Charles was seen in town today," informed Connie as soon as Amber and Grandma Martha entered. "He's not hiding anymore. He seems confident." The spring equinox is in 2 days, said Amber, surprising everyone with her information. Thunder told me that's when the treasure's seal can be restored, or completely broken. The elders exchanged alarmed looks. How do you know this? Asked Anthony. The mirror of time showed her, explained Grandma Martha, sitting down heavily. Amber was chosen not only by the medallion, but by the forest spirits themselves. Thunder took her to the sacred lake. A reverent silence filled the room. Then it's true, murmured Irene. The prophecy is being fulfilled. The daughter of the last guardians will be the one to restore the balance, or break it forever, added Anthony somberly. Grandma Martha gave him a severe look. My granddaughter carries not only the blood of Victor and Alice, but also the wisdom and strength of all our ancestors. She will do what is right. Amber, who had been listening in silence until then, stepped forward. I need to find the sacred cave before Charles, she declared. I need to restore the treasure's seal during the equinox. It's too dangerous, protested Grandma Martha. You're still learning. Charles has decades of knowledge and power, even if corrupted. And he also has armed men at his service, added Joe. We saw what happened right here in this garden. Amber touched the medallion on her chest, which emitted a slight silvery glow. I won't be alone. I have Thunder, I have the medallion, and I have the spirit of my parents with me. She raised her chin, determined. This is my responsibility, my destiny. I feel it with every fiber of my being. Grandma Martha observed her granddaughter with a mixture of pride and fear. She saw in her the same fire that had burned in Alice's eyes, the same unwavering determination of Victor. Then we need to prepare, she finally yielded, and we need to do it together. The next 24 hours were of intense preparation. Grandma Martha and the other elders taught Amber the rituals necessary to restore the treasure's seal, transmitting knowledge that would normally take years to assimilate. Joe prepared protection amulets with rare crystals and sacred herbs. Irene and Connie collected the ingredients for the potion that would strengthen Amber's connection with the forest spirits during the ritual. On the eve of the equinox, as the sun set painting the sky red and orange, Amber sat alone on the porch, contemplating the forest. Her heart was heavy with responsibility, but also strangely serene. As if, somehow, she knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. A figure emerged from the edge of the forest, walking slowly towards the house. Amber tensed, but then recognized the characteristic walk of the visitor. Charles, she murmured, standing up. He stopped a few meters from the porch, his face partially shadowed by the twilight. He looked older and more tired than when she had last seen him, but his eyes still shone with that same relentless determination. "Hello, Amber," he said, his voice surprisingly soft. "I thought it would be appropriate for us to meet before tomorrow. Niece and uncle, after all." "You're not my uncle," she replied coldly. "An uncle wouldn't have caused what you caused to my family." Charles smiled sadly. "Your parents were my best friends, you know. We grew up together, dreamed together. The world could have been different if they had understood the true purpose of the treasure. And what would that purpose be, according to you?" "To evolve. To transcend." Charles took a step forward, his eyes shining with almost religious fervor. "The treasure shouldn't be hidden, serving only to maintain the status quo. Its power could transform the world, cure diseases, reverse environmental destruction. Your parents were selfish to hide it." Amber felt the medallion warm on her chest, responding to her growing indignation. "My parents gave their lives to protect the balance. They knew that the power of the treasure isn't meant to be used by individuals, but to sustain the very life of the forest, of the planet." "Beautiful words," retorted Charles with disdain, "repeating what your grandmother taught you. But you didn't even know your parents, Amber. You don't know what they really wanted." A movement at the door revealed Grandma Martha, who had come out upon hearing voices. "Get off my property, Charles," ordered the old woman, her voice firm. "You're not welcome here." Charles slightly inclined his head in a mocking salute. "I just came to talk with my niece, Martha. I think she deserves to hear all sides of the story before making a decision that will affect the rest of her life." "She's already made her choice," replied Grandma Martha. "Amber is a true guardian, like her parents before her. She will restore the seal and protect the balance." Charles laughed, a cold sound without humor. We'll see. The equinox brings possibilities for both sides, he turned to Amber. Think carefully, niece. You can continue the flawed legacy of your parents, or you can do something truly transformative. The power of the treasure in the right hands could save the world that's dying a little each day. And who decides which are the right hands? You? Asked Amber. Someone with the vision to see beyond fear and tradition, he replied, backing away a few steps. Meet me tomorrow at Vale Falls at noon. Come alone and we'll talk more. We can resolve this peacefully, as family. Don't trust him, Amber, warned Grandma Martha. Charles lost any true connection with the forest long ago. Charles cast a final look at Amber, his penetrating eyes as if trying to see into her soul. Until tomorrow, niece, he said, before turning and disappearing into the growing shadows of the night. The day of the equinox dawned with a golden light filtering through the clouds, bathing Heartland Valley in an almost supernatural glow. Amber woke before the sun, having slept little, her mind occupied with the confrontation of the previous night and what was to come. In the kitchen, she found Grandma Martha preparing a special breakfast, filled with prairie fruits and a strengthening herbal tea. Eat well, my child, said the grandmother, serving her a steaming bowl. You'll need all your strength today. While they ate, Amber carefully observed her grandmother's wrinkled face, noticing how much she had aged in the last few weeks. The weight of knowledge, responsibility, and constant concern had taken its toll. I'll succeed, Grandma, she said softly, covering the old woman's hand with her own. I promise. Grandma Martha smiled, her eyes watery. I know you will. You have the strength of your parents and something more, something that's just yours, a connection with the forest that not even Alice and Victor had. After breakfast, Amber prepared for the ritual. She wore simple white clothes as on the night of her initiation. The medallion rested against her chest, warmer and brighter than ever. Grandma Martha handed her a small leather bag containing the ingredients for the sealing ritual. Remember, instructed the grandmother, the exact moment of the equinox will be at noon. That's when the veil between worlds will be thinnest and the seal can be renewed. The same time that Charles arranged to meet us, observed Amber. It's not a coincidence. No, it's not. He knows the right moment, and he also knows that Vale Falls is the most direct path to the sacred cave. Joe and the other members of the council arrived shortly after, bringing additional amulets and offering words of encouragement. The emotion was palpable in the small house. We won't be there physically, said Joe, placing an amulet around Amber's neck, but our energies and prayers will be with you. The council will maintain a protection circle here, amplifying your connection with the forest. When it was an hour until noon, Amber said goodbye to everyone, embracing her grandmother for a long time. Come back to me, Amber, whispered Grandma Martha in her ear. Promise. I promise, Grandma. Heading to the garden, Amber found Thunder waiting for her. The guardian buffalo looked even more imposing in the daylight, his black fur gleaming like polished obsidian. He slightly inclined, allowing her to mount. The journey to Vale Falls was different from anything Amber had ever experienced. Riding Thunder, she felt connected to every element of the forest. She could hear the bird's song as if it were a comprehensible language, feel the vital energy of each tree, each plant, each creature that inhabited the prairie. The medallion pulsed in sync with her racing heart, guiding them along the safest path. Vale Falls was one of the most beautiful and mystical places in the entire region. The crystal-clear water plummeted from a height of almost 50 meters, forming a natural curtain that concealed the entrance to the sacred cave. The thunder of the waterfall created a constant hypnotic music that seemed to invite visitors into an altered state of consciousness. Charles was already there, alone, standing at the edge of the lake formed by the waterfall. He wore dark clothes and carried a bag similar to Amber's. His face displayed an expression of surprise at seeing the young girl mounted on the guardian buffalo. Thunder, he murmured, clearly impressed. So it's true. You really were chosen by the ancestral guardian. Amber dismounted gracefully, caressing Thunder's muzzle before turning to Charles. I'm not here to talk, she declared firmly. I came to fulfill my destiny as a guardian. Your destiny can be greater than what they taught you, Amber, Charles took a step in her direction, his tone almost paternal. Think of what we could do together, uncle and niece combining our knowledge. The medallion chose you, and I have decades of experience. Experience in trying to steal what doesn't belong to you, she retorted. In betraying those who trusted you, in corrupting the balance. Charles's expression hardened. I see Martha has completely poisoned you against me. It's a shame. I was hoping we could resolve this as family. He snapped his fingers, and from the shadows of the forest emerged 6 armed men, the same, ones who had attacked Grandma Martha's house. If I can't convince you to help me voluntarily, I'll have to take the medallion, said Charles, his voice icy. One way or another, today I will access the treasure of Heartland Valley. Thunder let out a threatening roar, positioning himself protectively beside Amber. The men hesitated, clearly intimidated by the creature. Your guardian can't protect you from all of us, warned Charles. And I don't want to hurt you, Amber. Just hand over the medallion. You don't even know how to use it properly. Amber felt the medallion pulse against her chest, almost as if responding to the challenge. The sun was almost at its zenith. Only minutes remained until the exact equinox. I know more than you imagine, uncle, she replied, sarcastically emphasizing the kinship. I know that the treasure isn't an object to be possessed, but a responsibility to be honored. With a fluid movement, Amber ran towards the waterfall. Charles shouted orders to his men, who advanced, but Thunder blocked their path, pushing them away with his imposing horns. The young girl plunged through the curtain of water, feeling the icy shock for an instant before emerging on the other side, at the entrance to the sacred cave. There, a bluish light emanated from the walls covered with crystals, illuminating a path that spiraled down into the earth. Amber ran down the crystalline tunnel, hearing the sound of footsteps behind her. Charles had managed to get past Thunder and was following her. You don't know what you're doing, he shouted, his voice echoing off the walls of the cave. The ritual is too complex for a beginner. Ignoring him, Amber continued until she reached a circular chamber in the heart of the cave. In the center, on a stone altar, floated a small sphere of pulsing light, exactly as she had seen in the Mirror of Time, the treasure of Heartland Valley in its purest form. The sphere radiated energy in visible waves, colors, that Amber had never imagined existed danced around it. The power was palpable, alive, pulsing in sync with the earth itself. Approaching the altar, she felt the medallion heat up intensely, as if recognizing its origin. Fascinating, isn't it? Charles's voice echoed behind her. He was panting from the run, but his eyes shone with greed as he contemplated the treasure. The vital essence of the forest concentrated pure cosmic energy. With this, we could do anything. Cure incurable. Diseases, reverse environmental catastrophes, perhaps even bring people back. Amber didn't take her eyes off the sphere, but felt a shiver run down her spine at the last insinuation. My parents wouldn't come back at the cost of the world's imbalance, she replied firmly. They gave their lives to protect this, to maintain the balance. Charles took a step forward, approaching the altar from the opposite side. Balance? That's what your parents said too. But what is balance when the world out there is dying? When forests are devastated, species extinct, rivers poisoned. His voice carried a deep bitterness. The real imbalance is happening now while we guard this power that could save everything. A ray of sunlight hit the cave through a crack in the ceiling, exactly above the altar. The equinox had arrived. It was time. Amber removed from her bag the ingredients for the ritual: quartz crystals, dried herbs, a vial with the same elixir she had drunk in her initiation. With precise movements, as if guided by an ancestral memory, she began to position them around the sphere of light. No, shouted Charles, advancing to stop her. At that moment, a deafening roar echoed through the cave. Thunder had arrived, blocking the entrance to the chamber with his imposing presence, his eyes fixed on Charles with an intensity that made him back away. Thunder. Old friend, murmured Charles, his voice suddenly trembling. You also once believed in me, remember? Before they turned you against me. The guardian buffalo remained motionless, but his eyes reflected not anger, but a deep sadness. Amber, taking advantage of the distraction, removed the medallion from her neck and placed it in the center of the ritual arrangement, directly under the sphere of light. She began to intone the words that Grandma Martha had taught her, an ancient language that seemed to flow naturally from her lips, as if she had always known it. The medallion began to glow intensely, establishing a visible connection with the sphere, strands of silvery light intertwined with the energy of the treasure, strengthening the seal that kept it in balance. "You're making the same mistake as your parents," Charles shouted desperately, trying to advance, but Thunder continued to block his path. Amber continued the chant, her voice gaining strength. The air in the cave seemed to vibrate with power. Images began to form around her, ethereal silhouettes of ancient guardians, her ancestors, joining the ritual, amplifying her magic. Among the silhouettes, two figures gradually became clearer, more substantial than the others. Amber felt tears streaming down her face as she recognized the smiling and proud faces of her parents, Alice and Victor. "We are with you, daughter," her mother's voice echoed in her mind, not in words, but in pure feelings. "Complete what we began." The emotion of the moment almost made her lose concentration, but Amber gathered all her inner strength and continued with the ritual. The words of the enchantment flowed more easily now, guided by the love and spiritual presence of her parents. Charles observed the scene with a mixture of anger and fascination. Then something unexpected happened. One of the ethereal silhouettes stood out from the others and approached him. It was an elderly woman with serene features, whom he immediately recognized. "Grandmother?" he murmured, his voice trembling with emotion. The figure smiled gently and extended a translucent hand towards him. Charles felt a ghostly touch on his face, like a soft breeze carrying long-forgotten memories of his childhood, of when he learned about the Guardians, of when his heart was still pure. "I just wanted to do good," he whispered, tears streaming down his marked face. "I wanted to use the power to heal, to restore." The silhouette of his grandmother made a gesture of understanding, but then pointed to the sphere of light and to Amber, as if indicating that the true path to good wasn't through control, but through protecting the balance. Meanwhile, the ritual approached its climax. The connection between the medallion and the treasure intensified, creating a vortex of energy that completely enveloped Amber. The young girl felt her body float slightly above the ground as the final words of the enchantment formed on her lips. With a fluid movement of her hands, she directed all the energy to strengthen the seal. The sphere of light pulsed intensely, expanding for a moment before contracting again, stabilizing in a more serene, more controlled glow. The seal was renewed, stronger than ever. When Amber touched the ground again, the presence of the spirits began to fade. Her parents remained, for a moment longer, their eyes conveying a love and pride that words could never express, before they too disappeared. Silence fell over the cave, broken only by the panting breath of Charles, who had fallen to his knees, his face wet with tears. "I was wrong," he murmured, raising his face to look at Amber. "All these years, I was wrong." Amber approached him cautiously, replacing the medallion around her neck. "It's never too late to start over, Uncle," she said softly, extending her hand to help him up. Charles looked at the extended hand with hesitation, and then at Thunder, who observed the scene with his ancient and wise eyes. Finally, he accepted Amber's help and stood up. "Your mother would have done the same," he said with a choked voice. "She always believed in second chances." Together, guided by Thunder, they left the sacred cave. Outside, the men Charles had brought had disappeared, probably frightened by the presence of the guardian buffalo and the strange energetic phenomena that had emanated from the cave during the ritual. The sun was beginning its descent on the horizon when they arrived back at Heartland Valley. Grandma Martha and the council waited anxiously in the garden, where they maintained a circle of protection. Upon seeing Amber returning alongside Charles, mounted on Thunder, Grandma Martha's expression transformed from concern to astonishment and finally to relief. "It is done," announced Amber, dismounting gracefully. "The seal has been renewed, the balance is restored." Grandma Martha hugged her granddaughter tightly, tears of joy running down her wrinkled face. "I knew you could do it, my child," she whispered in her ear. "Your parents would be so proud." "They were there, Grandma," replied Amber, also in tears. "I saw them. They helped me with the ritual." When they separated from the embrace, Grandma Martha turned to Charles, who remained a few steps away, uncomfortable under the gaze of the council members. "Charles," she said, her voice surprisingly gentle, "welcome back." "I don't deserve your forgiveness, Martha," he replied, lowering his head, "nor that of anyone here." "It's not about deserving," Joe intervened, approaching cautiously. "It's about choosing a new path. Balance isn't just about the forest and its powers, it's also about us, about our souls." Thunder, who was observing the scene with his serene gaze, approached Charles and lowered his imposing head, offering him his muzzle for a touch. It was a gesture of acceptance, of forgiveness. With trembling hands, Charles touched the guardian buffalo, and a current of pure energy ran through his body, washing away years of bitterness and obsession. When he withdrew his hand, his eyes were different, clearer, more alive as they had been decades ago, before ambition consumed him. "Thank you," he whispered, not just to Thunder but to everyone present. That night, under a starry sky that seemed brighter than ever, the Council of Guardians gathered in celebration. The medallion now rightfully rested on Amber's neck, officially, recognized as the newest guardian of the treasure of Heartland Valley. The young girl sat on the porch, observing the stars while the adults talked animatedly inside the house. She felt transformed, as if she had lived several lives in just a few weeks. The pain of discovery about her parents was still there, but now accompanied by a new understanding, a purpose, a connection with something greater than herself. "May I join you?" asked Charles, approaching hesitantly. Amber smiled and indicated the space beside her on the porch bench. "Did you really see them, Alice and Victor?" he asked, after a few moments of contemplative silence. "Yes," replied Amber, touching the medallion. "They never really left us, you know. They're in the earth, in the air, in the very energy of the forest they swore to protect." Charles nodded, a melancholic smile on his lips. "Your mother used to say something similar, that guardians never really go away, they just change form." At the edge of the forest, Thunder watched the house, his majestic silhouette illuminated by moonlight. By his side, two translucent silhouettes smiled at the scene of uncle and niece reconciled, before dissolving into the night breeze, becoming part of the eternal energy that pulsed in nature. Amber felt the medallion warm gently against her chest, like a silent reminder that, although her journey as a guardian was just beginning, she would never be truly alone. The legacy of her parents lived through her, as did the ancestral knowledge of all the guardians who came before. And in Heartland Valley, where the prairie meets the dense forest, balance was restored.